Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is a reading roundup. Now I've read a lot of books recently and so I'm just going to dive right in. The first book I want to talk about is The Right Sort of Man by Allison Montclair. This is the first in a historical mystery series that's being called the Right Sort Marriage Bureau series, or else the Sparks and Bainbridge series. I don't know. Anyway, so this is a series that begins immediately following World War II in London, and we have two main characters, Iris Sparks and Mrs. Gwendolyn Bainbridge, and the two of them have opened the Right Sort Marriage Bureau where they pair people up who are looking to get married. Iris is single and as it turns out has a very interesting history and the kinds of things that she got up to in the war. And Gwendolyn is a widow with a young son who lives with her in-laws. And she also, it turns out, has an interesting history as well. The funny thing is, and it could be because of the cover, but I was expecting something slightly different with this book, but I really enjoyed it. I was sort of expecting a little more cozier type of book, and it's not, I mean, don't get me wrong, it is not, hugely violent and anything like that, but it is just a tad grittier than I was expecting, and to be honest, it's more interesting than I was expecting it to be. I really enjoyed this book, and I already have the second one out from the library to continue it. So, what happens in this book is they find out that a girl has been murdered, and she had just come to their agency. She's a new client, and the man who is arrested for her murder is the man that they set her up with. And so, of course, they are horrified and are, it's not good for the reputation of their new business, and so they are trying to figure out what was happening. And yeah, like I said, I really liked it. I liked the characters, I liked the writing style. It was a really interesting story. I liked learning about London right after the war. So this is set in 1946, I want to say. I think it's 1946. It could still be 1945. I think it's 1946. Yes, June 1946. And so there was just some really interesting stuff about kind of how London is still recovering. So you get that impression of all of the bomb damage, and so people kind of still clambering over rubble, or houses where, the whole street's demolished and there's one house that's still standing. You get a lot of that. You also get the rationing that's still in place, and how hard it is to find, do they have a coupon to get a new dress if they need a new dress? How hard it is to still find stockings, all of that. I really enjoyed that aspect of the book. I found that really fascinating. So yeah, if you like a book that is a good mystery, but set kind of after the war, where you learn kind of like, where you delve into like the consequences of what it's like for a city that is trying to come back after after the war, and for the people who were involved as well, the consequences, and for them trying to live again after the experiences that they personally had during the war. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. And then I read the second in the Constable Twitton series. This is The Man That Got Away by Lynne Truss. This is a historical mystery series set in Brighton in 1957. One interesting thing I discovered is that the books are set really close together. So this is basically, it starts 2 weeks after the events of book 1 in the series, which I find like fascinating, that kind of really compressed time period. So Twitton mentions in this book having only been in Brighton for 3 weeks. and it's already at that point a week since the murder. So it's a very compressed timeline between the books, but which is good because there's stuff that's ongoing that makes more sense to happen in a compressed time period. So I really enjoy this book, this series. I love the writing style. It is very witty, very funny, and you just have to go with this world of, it's this great juxtaposition between the tourist Brighton and the criminal underworld of Brighton. So it's that juxtaposition, but also this like lovely look at how those two live together in this place. The characters are great. Constable Twitton he's just this brand new police officer. He loves that he's a police officer, but a lot of people find him really annoying. The sergeant that he works with is great, and his inspector, who, I mean, frankly, doesn't actually want to do the job of an inspector. I think he would much prefer to just be a lecturer. He does this series on the BBC that he frankly spends most of his time working on that, and would prefer to live under the delusion that there is no crime in Brighton. So yeah, I love this series a lot, and I know that there's a new book just out, the third one, that I've already read that was great, and I really hope there's more coming with this series. Okay, and then I read a cozy. This is Death at a Country Mansion by Louise R. Ines. This one was really fun. This was the one that had the hilarious puns on the back. So Daisy Thorne is our main character. She owns a hairdressing salon in the village, and her very good friend's mother dies. And so of course she's there to comfort her friend, and she's been a good friend of the family, and so she's kind of a witness and gets herself involved in the investigation, as happens in cozy mysteries. It was just fun. It was totally a cozy, but it was a pretty interesting story. I did guess who the killer was in the end, but yeah, it was really entertaining. So if you're looking for a good English cozy, you might want to give this one a try, Death at a Country Mansion. And then I finished my Bayeux Tapestry book. This was the book that I chose from my TBR mug, which you've probably forgotten completely about because I pulled this from that mug, I think, in February. But of course, because this is what I chose, I didn't read any of it in March because of March Mystery Madness. But it explains the history surrounding the events that are depicted on the Bayeux Tapestry, and then it also talks about the tapestry itself. And this was really, really interesting. So this is a Folio Society book from the 70s. And I enjoyed, so they talk about the historical background, they talk about the authorities, so where do we get our information from about the events surrounding the Bayeux Tapestry, and then they talk about the tapestry itself. They give a description of the tapestry, the history of the tapestry, and the importance of the tapestry, and then at the very end there are plates that show what the tapestry looks like. So there was a couple of things in here that I wanted to read to you because they were really interesting. So we have the historical account of basically the Battle of Hastings, 1066, when William the Conqueror invaded that whole event. And we have an account of it that everyone is fairly certain is basically contemporary, by William of Poitiers, and so there's a translation in here. And what's hilarious is that he is 100% biased in his description of the events. And this quote will let you know who he is biased towards. Duke William returned to his base. He kept Harold with him as a guest for some time. Then he loaded him with presents and sent him on his way. By doing this, he paid his respects both to King Edward, at whose order Harold had come, and to Harold himself, who had undertaken the mission. What is more, one of the two hostages, Harold's nephew, went back with him, for to please his guest, Duke William gave him his liberty. These, then, are the reproaches made against you, Harold. After all these kindnesses, how could you dare to deprive Duke William of his inheritance and to make war on him, you who by an oath so sacrosanct had bound yourself and all your people to him? Placing your hands in his and swearing fealty? It was for you to hold the Englishmen in check. Instead, you most perniciously encouraged them in their revolt. The following winds, which swelled your coal-black sails as you journeyed homeward, brought nothing but unhappiness. You horrid man! The calm sea waters which permitted you to cross back to your native shore must ever be accursed. The quiet harbor where you landed must bear its brunt of shame, for with you came the most disastrous shipwreck ever suffered by your fatherland. I just thought that was hilarious. Okay, and so then here's a little bit about the tapestry itself. The tapestry was designed to be hung round a wall, probably in Bayeux Cathedral. Its purpose was to tell the story of the fall of King Harold and the triumph of William as graphically as possible to an illiterate people. The captions enhanced the understanding of those who could read Latin. No doubt they also served as running headlines for churchmen who were explaining the sequence of events to groups of visitors. And then I wanted to show you one of the plates because I thought it was an interesting time period. So here we go. Now this plate here, it says, "These people are marveling at the star." So if you look up here on the plate, this is Halley's Comet. So I thought that was really interesting that Halley's Comet was visible in the sky prior to the invasion. So yeah, that was really good. I'm glad that I read it, and I learned a lot about that time period, but also the tapestry itself, which is fascinating. Okay, then I read the third in the Inspector Chopra series. This is The Strange Disappearance of a Bollywood Star by Vaseem Khan. I love this series. And again, this book was so great. We delve into the world of Bollywood a little bit. And despite the covers, these are not cozies at all. They are set in modern day Mumbai, and there is violence, and there is, not excessive violence at all. Certainly not. But there is some. There is poverty, there is injustice and corruption. But I just absolutely adore this series. I love the writing style, I love the characters, and the mysteries are always really, really interesting. There was a piece in here that I wanted to read. This is about Inspector Chopra. He had retired from the police force, but how could one retire the experience and instincts honed over an entire career? The detective agency provided an outlet for his need to put to use those hard-won skills and his even greater need to pursue justice, a cause ingrained within the folds and hollows of his heart. And that there is why I love Inspector Chopra, is his need to go after justice. And so yeah, I love this series. If you've never given it a try, I highly, highly recommend them. Okay, and then I read another cozy. I was really into the cozies recently. This is A Rant of Raisins by Christine Goff. This is the first in the Bird Watchers series, which is what attracted me to this. I'm not a bird watcher myself, technically, but I do enjoy watching. If there's birds in my yard, I do enjoy watching them. And so this is a cozy mystery series set in Colorado. And so Rachel comes from the city to stay at her aunt's home, which is a ranch in Colorado that also serves as a bird sanctuary. And when she gets there, she discovers that there is a journalist that's been hanging around that is potentially writing a story that has negative connotations for her Uncle William, who is now passed away, but of course his reputation is important to her Aunt Miriam. And so she's trying to figure out what's going on with that. And it involves, of course, rare birds and birds' eggs and all of that stuff. And then the journalist is found dead. And so, of course, she investigates. And so, yeah, it was good. It was a good cozy mystery. I really enjoyed the bird watching aspect of it. There's a bird watching club that plays a big role in the story. And yeah, it was just really really interesting. Lots about birds, but not too much, so that if that's not something you're hugely interested in, it's not going to drive you crazy. Okay, and then I read the second in the Eddie Flynn series. This is The Plea by Steve Cavanagh, and I loved it. I've recently talked about The Defense that I read, which I thought was absolutely fantastic, and this one was potentially even better than The Defense. So in The Plea, Eddie is approached by the FBI, and they want him to acquire this defendant. So they want him to take him on as a client and convince him to plea, because they need leverage. There's something that he knows that they need, and so he's on trial for murder, and they want Eddie to get him as a client and then convince him to plea, and so that they can get what they want and he can get a reduced sentence. And they, to give Eddie, of course, more pressure, because of course he needs more pressure, right? They tell him that if he doesn't do this, they will arrest his wife for crimes at her job. Now, she's a lawyer who works for a really big law firm, and they have supposed evidence that she's done something wrong, although frankly, I mean, it's dicey. But anyway, so of course Eddie has to choose now between his client and his wife, and so he has that pressure. This story also has the time pressure as well. Again, he has 2 days to get this done. And so, yeah, it was great. We learned a little bit more about Eddie. Some characters from the first book were in this one as well. And I mean, I absolutely love the way that Steve Cavanagh writes. His story development is on point. It is amazing. The pacing it's fast paced and tense and suspenseful. He always surprises me. He never takes the easy or obvious route in his story. I'm constantly surprised by where the story goes. I highly recommend this series. They are just really, really entertaining. All right, and then I read The Liar's Girl by Catherine Ryan Howard. This is a story set in Dublin. And the main character is Allison Smith. 10 years before, she was a freshman at St. John's College in Dublin, and 5 girls end up being murdered, and her best friend is one of them. And it turns out that her boyfriend is the killer, and he is arrested and put in a psychiatric hospital. And she runs away and escapes to, I think she goes to the Netherlands. And so when the story opens, it's been 10 years, she's in the Netherlands, and she's never gone back to Ireland. But some more girls are being killed the same way that they were 10 years before, and the police want her to come back to try and talk to Will, her ex-boyfriend, who is still in the psychiatric hospital. So yeah, it was a good story. It was Allison was an interesting character. She was only 19 when all of this happened to her, and so her reaction to it and her current reaction to events was very entertaining. Well written, interesting story. One thing that I thought was funny is Gillian McAllister is quoted on the back as saying, "An absolute belter of a book, a standout book in the thriller genre, real and sympathetic characters, a flawlessly paced plot, and a genuinely original premise." I would agree with most of that, but I'm not so sure that it's all that original of a premise. But yeah, but it was pretty good. Okay, and then I read Arrowwood by Mick Finlay. This is the book, let me see. Oh, when I did the quick to judge tag, this was the book that I ended up picking, and I'm glad that I did. This was a really fun historical mystery set in London in 1895. As it says on the front, London society takes its problems to Sherlock Holmes. Everyone else goes to Arrowwood. He is basically a private detective, you know, like Sherlock Holmes, but he lives in kind of a bit of a grungier neighborhood. He has a Dr. Watson in Barnett, who is the narrator of the story, and so yeah, they get asked by this girl to find her brother. Her brother has disappeared and she is desperate to know that he's okay, and so they're asked to look into that. Yeah, it was good. It was well written, interesting characters. It was hilarious how much Arrowwood does not like Sherlock Holmes and thinks that his method of detecting is hogwash. So yeah, so that was very entertaining. And yeah, I think this is the first of a series, and I would definitely pick up more from this series. I liked the descriptions of London. It's definitely a grittier London than you would maybe read about if you were reading Sherlock Holmes. But yeah, very entertaining. And then finally, I read The Little Paris Bookshop by Nina George. This was a buddy read that I did with Danny from Spinelli Speaks, and that was really fun. This is the first time I've done a buddy read with her, and it was great talking about this book with her. This book was published in 2015, I believe, and it's been translated from the German by Simon Pear. It is set in France, at first in Paris, but then it travels through a bit of France. There's a map of their travels. So our main character, Jean Pardue, he owns a book barge, which is awesome and fascinating. And he calls himself a literary apothecary. And so when people come to him for books, he likes to prescribe the book that they need to read, which was interesting. But you discover that he is a man who is grieving. It's been 20 years since the woman that he loved disappeared, and he thinks that she's just left him, and his life's been basically on hold. But then he discovers some truths and sets out on a journey on his book barge through this book. And so this book is basically a story about grief. It is a story about the journey of grief, which in this book turns into a literal journey as he travels through the canals and waterways of France. And so it was good. It was pretty good. I mean, you have to be in the right frame of mind to read a book about grief. But yeah, I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. I didn't really like the adultery piece of it, but the fact is that it's about a man who loved deeply and lost and is dealing with, finally, dealing with some grief. And so yeah, The Little Paris Bookshop by Nina George. Okay, so that is what I've been reading recently. Have you read any of these books? I would love to talk about them with you in the comment section down below. Okay, so I realized I forgot to do my TBR mug. Since I read the Bayeux Tapestry, I need to choose another book from my TBR mug. So I think this was back in February. I'd done a book haul, and I put some of those books here in the mug in an effort to read them maybe more promptly than I might otherwise. And so the Bayeux Tapestry was the first that I chose out of the TBR mug. And so it's time to do choose another book. So I'm going to give these a bit of a stir. All right, and we have Can You Forgive Her? Sweet. That's Anthony Trollope. So I'm gonna go grab it so I can show you. Okay, so it's this beautiful Folio Society edition that I got of Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope. This is the Folio Society edition from 1989. There are some lovely illustrations in here. I'm excited. I've been wanting to read more Trollope, and I was kind of first initially gonna stick with the Barchestershire Chronicles, that series, because I've read The Warden and I've read Barchester Towers, and next up is Dr. Thorne, I believe. But I am going to go with this because that's what I pulled out of the jar. Now, this was first published in 1864, 1865, and let me see, I don't know a lot about this story, so I'm going to take a look at the introduction. According to the introduction, Can You Forgive Her has an important place in the development of Trollope's art and is doubly valuable as the first of the so-called Palliser novels. Okay, so that's good. That's good that it's the first in a series. So I'm excited to get into this. This is a bit of a chunker, but yeah, I'm gonna take it slow and read that. So yeah, I'm excited that that's what I've pulled out of the TBR mug to read next. Anthony Trollope's Can You Forgive Her? And I will see you for another video soon. Bye.